I never thought my biggest battle after retiring from 20 years of military service would be fought not on foreign soil, but right here in my own Texas driveway. But that's exactly where I found myself standing last summer, facing down the most formidable opponent I'd encountered in years. A power-hungry HOA board with an agenda that would make even the most stubborn dictator blush. This HOA revenge story begins like many others, with a simple notice that changed everything. My name is Marcus Henderson, and I'm a 58-year-old retired Army Ranger who settled in the quiet suburbs of Austin, Texas, after serving my country. I bought my modest 3-bedroom home specifically because it promised peace and tranquility after decades of chaos. The house wasn't fancy, but it had something I treasured, a spacious circular driveway that could easily accommodate my classic Mustang collection and my RV, which I planned to use for traveling the country I'd spent so much time defending. The neighborhood, known as Oak Creek Estates, seemed perfect when I moved in 3 years ago. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained common areas, and friendly neighbors who waved as they passed by. The HOA fees were reasonable, and the covenants appeared straightforward. I should have known better. In the military, we had a saying, "The devil you don't know is always more dangerous than the one you do." I was about to meet my devil, and she went by the name of Brenda Thompson, HOA Board President. And, as I would soon discover, the queen of suburban tyranny. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in June. I was enjoying my coffee on the front porch, watching the sunrise, a ritual I'd developed since leaving the service, when a bright orange envelope caught my eye. It was taped to my mailbox, flapping in the gentle Texas breeze. At first, I thought it was just another community newsletter, but the bold violation notice across the top told me otherwise. I unfolded the notice with a sense of confusion that quickly turned to disbelief. According to the HOA, my driveway, my entire circular driveway, was actually community property. The letter claimed that a recent review of property plats revealed this error, and that I would need to cease using it immediately. Furthermore, I was fined $500 for unauthorized use of common areas and given 30 days to remedy the situation. I read the notice 3 times, each pass more incredulous than the last. This driveway had been part of my property since the house was built in 1998. It was clearly marked on the survey I received when I purchased the home. I'd paid taxes on this land for 3 years. The idea that it could suddenly be declared community property was absurd. That same day, I called the HOA office and requested a meeting with the board. The woman who answered the phone, whose voice I would come to recognize as Brenda's, informed me that the next board meeting wasn't for 2 weeks, but that she would try to squeeze me in if I came by the office. When I arrived at the HOA office later that afternoon, I was greeted by Brenda herself, a woman in her late 50s with perfectly coiffed hair and an expression that suggested she'd just smelled something unpleasant. She ushered me into a small conference room without offering so much as a cup of water. "Mr. Henderson," she began, folding her hands primly on the table, "I understand you have questions about the violation notice." "I certainly do," I replied, keeping my voice level. Military training had taught me the value of controlling one's emotions in tense situations. "This driveway has been part of my property since I bought the house. I have the survey to prove it." Brenda sighed dramatically, as if I were a small child who couldn't grasp a simple concept. "Recent discoveries have shown that there was an error in the original platting of this community. Your driveway encroaches on what is legally common area. We're simply correcting this oversight." "An oversight that's gone unnoticed for 25 years, I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. "These things happen," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "The important thing is that we've caught it now. You'll need to find alternative parking arrangements and remove your vehicles from the common area." "My RV and classic cars are stored there. Where exactly do you expect me to put them?" "That's not really the HOA's concern," Brenda replied coldly. "You have 30 days to comply. If you haven't resolved the issue by then, additional fines will accrue at a rate of $50 per day." I left the HOA office feeling a familiar mix of anger and frustration, the same emotions I'd experienced when dealing with bureaucracy in the military. But this time, I wasn't a soldier following orders. I was a homeowner with rights, and I was determined to fight for them. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by documents related to my home purchase. There was the original survey, clearly showing my driveway within my property lines. There was the deed, with its legal description of my land. And there was the HOA's own governing documents, which I'd carefully read when I moved in. Nothing in any of these documents suggested that my driveway was anything but private property. If anything, they confirmed that it was mine. So why was the HOA suddenly making this claim? The answer came 2 days later, in the form of a conversation with my neighbor, Jim Rodriguez, a retired police officer who'd lived in Oak Creek Estates for 15 years. "You're not the first one Brenda's tried this with," Jim told me over the fence that separated our yards. "About 5 years ago, she claimed the Petersons' back patio was common area. They fought it for months, spent thousands on legal fees, and eventually just gave up and moved." "Why would she do that?" I asked. Jim leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Brenda and her husband own a construction company. They've been trying to get the contract to expand the community center for years. The board won't approve it because there's not enough money in the budget. But if she can find enough homeowners for various violations, that budget grows pretty quickly." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You think this is about money?" "I know it is," Jim said grimly. "She's been pulling stunts like this since she got on the board 7 years ago. Most people just pay the fines rather than fight." Well, I wasn't most people. 20 years in the Army had taught me that bullies only understand one thing: resistance. And I was about to show Brenda Thompson more resistance than she'd ever encountered. The next morning, I contacted a real estate attorney recommended by a friend from my VFW post. Sarah Chen specialized in property rights and had a reputation for being tenacious in court. When I explained my situation, she agreed to meet with me the following day. "HOA disputes are unfortunately common," Sarah told me when we met in her office. "But this one seems particularly egregious. If your documents clearly show the driveway is your property, they don't have a legal leg to stand on. So what's our next move?" I asked. "First, we send a formal response to the HOA, disputing their claim and requesting evidence to support their position," Sarah explained. "Then we file a complaint with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, which oversees HOAs in this state, and we prepare for a legal battle just in case." As I left Sarah's office, I felt a surge of confidence. For the first time since receiving that violation notice, I felt like I was taking control of the situation. Little did I know, Brenda was just getting started. A week after my meeting with Sarah, I received another notice from the HOA. This one wasn't just about the driveway. It was a laundry list of supposed violations. My lawn was too high. I'd mowed it 2 days prior. My mailbox was non-compliant. It was the same one that had been there when I bought the house. My trash cans were visible from the street. They were out on trash day, as per the sanitation schedule. The fines totaled $250, with a threat of further enforcement action if I didn't pay within 15 days. I immediately forwarded the notice to Sarah, who responded with a strongly worded letter to the HOA board, accusing them of harassment and selective enforcement. She also requested copies of all complaints filed against me, as well as evidence of similar enforcement actions against other homeowners. Their response was swift and petty. 2 days later, I returned home to find a bright orange sticker on my garage door declaring it in violation of community standards. The reason? Faded paint. I stood there, staring at that sticker, feeling a rage I hadn't experienced since my combat days. This was personal now. Brenda wasn't just trying to claim my driveway, she was trying to make my life miserable until I gave in. That evening, I decided it was time to take this fight to the community. I drafted a carefully worded email to all homeowners in Oak Creek Estates, explaining my situation and asking if anyone else had experienced similar treatment with the HOA. I didn't have everyone's email address, but I did have a neighborhood directory, and I spent the next few hours sending individual messages. The response was overwhelming. Within 24 hours, I'd heard from over 30 homeowners who had their own stories of Brenda's tyranny, unreasonable fines, selective enforcement, sudden discoveries of violations that had existed for years. The pattern was clear, and it wasn't just about money, it was about power. Among the responses was one from Eleanor Briggs, an 82-year-old widow who'd lived in the community since it was founded. She asked if I could stop by her house the next day, saying she had information that might help my case. When I arrived at Eleanor's home the following afternoon, she ushered me into her sunroom, where she had a stack of documents waiting. I was on the original architectural review committee when this community was built, Eleanor explained, her hands trembling slightly as she sorted through the papers. Brenda's claims about your driveway are nonsense. I was there when the plats were drawn. I was there when the first homes were built. Your driveway has always been part of your property. She handed me a document that made my heart skip a beat. It was the original master plan for Oak Creek Estates, dated 1997, with each property clearly delineated. And there, in bold black lines, was my driveway firmly within the boundaries of what was now my property. This is incredible, I said, scanning the document. Does the HOA have a copy of this? They should, Eleanor replied. It was part of the founding documents, but knowing Brenda, she probably misplaced it. As I left Eleanor's house, master plan in hand, I felt a shift in the battle. I was no longer just defending my property. I was armed with the truth. Armed with the master plan and a growing list of supporters, I met with Sarah to plan our next move. We decided to call a special meeting of the HOA board to present our evidence and demand they drop their claim to my driveway. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening in the community center. When I arrived, I was surprised to see the room nearly full. Word had spread through the neighborhood, and it seemed half the community had come to witness the confrontation. Brenda sat at the front table with the other board members, her expression a mixture of annoyance and arrogance. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium, master plan in hand. Madam President, members of the board, I began, my voice steady. I'm here today to dispute your claim that my driveway is community property. I have evidence that proves conclusively that it has always been part of my private property. I held up the master plan. This is the original master plan for Oak Creek Estates, dated 1997. As you can see, my driveway is clearly within the property lines of what is now my home. This document was provided to me by Eleanor Briggs, who was on the original architectural review committee. Brenda's face reddened. That document is outdated. There have been revisions since then. If there have been revisions, I countered, then I request to see them, along with records of when they were approved by the homeowners and filed with the county, as required by Texas law. The room fell silent. Brenda shuffled through some papers, clearly flustered. Furthermore, I continued, I have here signed statements from 30 homeowners who have experienced similar harassment from this board. Unreasonable fines, selective enforcement, and sudden discoveries of violations that have existed for years. This isn't about maintaining community standards, it's about abusing power. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Brenda slammed her gavel. Order! This meeting is not a forum for personal attacks. This isn't a personal attack, I said calmly. This is about holding this board accountable for its actions. Now, I demand that you drop all fines against me and acknowledge in writing that my driveway is private property. If you refuse, I'm prepared to take legal action. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat, Mr. Henderson? It's a promise, I replied evenly. The meeting ended without resolution, but I hadn't really expected one. What I had achieved was something far more valuable. I had shown Brenda and the board that I wasn't going to back down, and I had shown my neighbors that they didn't have to live in fear of the HOA. As I left the community center that night, several homeowners approached me, thanking me for standing up to Brenda. Among them was Tom Peterson, the man Jim had mentioned who had moved after a similar dispute with the HOA 5 years earlier. I wish I'd fought like you're doing, Tom said, shaking my head. Instead, I just gave up and moved. It cost me a fortune in real estate fees and legal costs. Well, maybe this fight will help others avoid what you went through, I replied. True to her word, Brenda refused to back down. 2 days after the meeting, I received a letter from the HOA's attorney threatening legal action if I didn't cease use of community property and pay all outstanding fines. Sarah responded with a lawsuit of our own, filing a petition in Travis County District Court seeking a declaratory judgment that my driveway was private property and an injunction prohibiting the HOA from further harassment. We also filed complaints with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation and the State Attorney General's office. The legal battle was slow and frustrating, There were motions and counter-motions, discovery requests, and depositions. The HOA's attorney, a slick young lawyer from a prominent Austin firm, tried every tactic in the book to delay and intimidate. But Sarah was relentless. And the truth was on our side. 3 months into the legal battle, we received a break. During the discovery process, the HOA was forced to produce all records related to property disputes in the community. Buried in those records was a memo from Brenda to the other board members outlining her plan to identify and reclaim common areas that were being used by homeowners for private purposes. The memo specifically mentioned my driveway as a prime target because of its size, location. The memo also revealed that Brenda's husband's construction company had submitted a proposal to the HOA for a 250-0 expansion of the community center, exactly the kind of project Jim had mentioned. "This is gold," Sarah said when we reviewed the memo. "It shows that this was never about correcting an error. It was a deliberate plan to claim your property and generate revenue for their pet project." Armed with this evidence, we filed a motion for summary judgment, asking the court to rule in our favor without a trial. The HOA's attorney opposed the motion, but the judge seemed skeptical of their position. During the hearing on our motion, the judge questioned the HOA's attorney closely about the memo and the lack of any evidence supporting their claim to my driveway. "So you're telling me," the judge said, "that despite 25 years of this driveway being considered part of the private property, despite multiple surveys showing it as such, and despite the original master plan showing it within the property lines, the HOA suddenly discovered it was common area? And this discovery coincided with the board president's desire to fund an expansion project that would benefit her husband's company?" The attorney stammered through a response, but it was clear he had no good explanation. The judge took the matter under submission, promising a ruling within 30 days. As we left the courthouse, I felt a surge of hope. For the first time since this battle began, I felt like victory was within reach. While waiting for the judge's ruling, I focused on building support within the community. With the help of several neighbors, I organized a homeowners' rights meeting at the community center. To my surprise, over 100 people showed up, nearly a third of the households in Oak Creek Estates. At the meeting, I shared my story and the evidence we'd uncovered. I also invited Sarah to speak about homeowners' rights under Texas law. The response was overwhelming. By the end of the evening, we had collected signatures from over 60 homeowners demanding changes to the HOA board and its practices. Among the attendees was a reporter from the Austin American-Statesman who had heard about my case through the neighborhood grapevine. She wrote a balanced but revealing article about the dispute, highlighting the pattern of fines and selective enforcement under Brenda's leadership. The article sparked a firestorm of attention. Other media outlets picked up the story, and soon, Oak Creek Estates was making headlines across Austin. The negative publicity put enormous pressure on the HOA board, especially Brenda, who seemed to relish the attention at first but grew increasingly defensive as more homeowners came forward with their own stories. 2 weeks after the homeowners meeting, something unexpected happened. 3 other board members contacted Sarah, expressing their concern about the direction the HOA was heading and their desire to resolve this matter amicably. In a private meeting, they admitted that Brenda had been running the board like her personal fiefdom and that they had gone along with her demands to avoid conflict. They also revealed that the HOA's reserve funds were dangerously low, partly due to questionable expenditures on projects that benefited board members and their associates. Armed with this information, Sarah drafted a proposed settlement agreement. The HOA would drop all claims to my driveway, refund all fines I had paid, issue a formal apology, and agree to reforms, including an independent audit of the HOA's finances and new procedures for handling disputes and fines. When we presented the proposal to Brenda, she reacted predictably with outrage and threats. But this time, she didn't have the support of the full board. The 3 members who had met with us stood their ground, and a 4th, who had been silent until now, sided with them. Outvoted and isolated, Brenda had little choice but to accept the settlement. The agreement was signed just days before the judge was scheduled to rule on our motion for summary judgment. The settlement agreement was a complete victory. Not only did it resolve my dispute with the HOA, but it also included provisions that would protect other homeowners from similar treatment in the future. The HOA agreed to 1. Acknowledge in writing that my driveway was private property. 2. Refund all fines I had paid, plus interest. 3. Cover my legal fees. 4. Conduct an independent audit of its finances. 5. Implement new procedures for handling disputes and imposing fines. 6. Provide homeowners with greater access to HOA records. 7. Establish an independent ombudsman to review complaints against the board. For Brenda, the settlement was deeply humiliating. She was forced to sign a document that essentially admitted she had abused her power and harassed homeowners. But the real consequences came later. Following the independent audit, it was discovered that Brenda had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including meals, travel, and even improvements to her own property that were framed as community enhancements. The audit also revealed that her husband's construction company had been paid for work that was never completed or substandard. Armed with this information, the other board members voted to remove Brenda as president and initiated legal action against her and her husband to recover the misappropriated funds. Brenda resigned from the board before she could be removed, but the legal action continued. In the end, Brenda and her husband were ordered to repay over $75,000 to the HOA. Their construction company lost its license to work in Texas due to the violations uncovered during the audit. And Brenda, once the most powerful woman in Oak Creek Estates, became a pariah in the community she had once ruled. As for me, I was able to enjoy my driveway in peace. My Mustang collection stayed right where it was, and my RV was ready for the road trips I had planned. But the victory was about more than just my property. It was about justice and fairness for all homeowners in the community. Looking back on this battle, I've learned several valuable lessons that I want to share with anyone facing similar challenges with their HOA. First, know your rights. Most states have laws governing HOAs, and these laws often provide significant protections for homeowners. In Texas, for example, the Texas Property Code includes specific provisions that limit what HOAs can and cannot do. Understanding these laws gave me the confidence to stand up to Brenda and the board. Second, document everything. From the moment I received that first violation notice, I kept meticulous records of every interaction with the HOA, every notice I received, and every step I took in response. This documentation proved invaluable when building my case. Third, build support. I couldn't have won this battle alone. The support of neighbors like Jim and Eleanor, the expertise of my attorney, Sarah, and the backing of the broader community were all essential to my victory. If you're facing an unreasonable HOA, reach out to your neighbors. You might be surprised how many people share your frustration. Fourth, be persistent. HOA disputes can be long and frustrating. There were times when I wanted to just give up and pay the fines to make the problem go away, but I knew that giving in would only encourage more abuse. Not just for me, but for other homeowners as well. Finally, don't be afraid to fight. HOAs count on most homeowners being too busy or too intimidated to challenge their decisions. But when you're in the right, and you have the evidence to prove it, the law is on your side. Standing up to bullying behavior isn't just about protecting your own rights, it's about protecting the rights of everyone in your community. Today, life in Oak Creek Estates is very different. With new leadership and reforms in place, the HOA has become what it was always meant to be: a force for maintaining property values and community standards, not a tool for personal vendettas and power trips. I've even joined the Architectural Review Committee, the same one Eleanor served on all those years ago. I wanted to help ensure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. It's been rewarding to work with other homeowners to make our community a better place rather than fighting against an unaccountable board. My driveway remains exactly as it was when this battle began. A place where I park my cars, work on my projects, and enjoy the Texas sunshine. But it means more to me now than it did before. It's not just concrete and asphalt. It's a symbol of standing up for what's right, of fighting injustice, and of the power of community when people come together for a common cause. To anyone out there facing similar challenges with their HOA, I offer this advice. Know your rights, document everything, build support, be persistent, and don't be afraid to fight. The path to justice isn't always easy, but it's always worth walking. And to the Brenda Thompsons of the world, I have this to say. Homeowners associations exist to serve the community, not to serve your ego or your bank account. When you forget that, when you abuse your power and harass the people you're supposed to represent, don't be surprised when they fight back. Because in the end, as I learned in my 20 years of military service and in my battle with the HOA, freedom isn't free. Sometimes you have to fight for it, even if the battlefield is just your own driveway. Have you ever had a dispute with your HOA? Yes. And I fought it successfully. B. Yes. But I gave up. C. No. But I'm worried about potential issues. D. No, my HOA is reasonable. 1. What should be your first step when receiving an HOA violation notice you believe is unfair? 2. Why is documentation important in HOA disputes? 3. How can homeowners work together to prevent HOA abuse? I'd love to hear about your experiences with HOAs in the comments below. Have you ever faced a situation like mine? How did you handle it? And what advice would you give to homeowners dealing with unreasonable HOA boards? If you found this story helpful, please share it with others who might be facing similar challenges. Together, we can help ensure that homeowners associations serve their intended purpose, protecting property values and maintaining community standards rather than becoming instruments of harassment and abuse. And if you're currently dealing with an HOA dispute, remember, you have rights, you have options, and you don't have to fight alone. Stand up for what's right, not just for yourself, but for everyone in your community. What do you think Brenda learned from this experience? Do you believe she truly understood the harm she caused? Or was she just upset about getting caught? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, the deed to your property is more than just a piece of paper. It's proof of your rights as a homeowner. Don't let anyone take those rights away without a fight.